Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Mission Yozakura Family, Season 1, Episode 24. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we're picking up with the conclusion of Kurosawa and Shinzo's fight. And Shinzo is able to attack Kurosawa in a way where he can't regenerate. I thought it was so interesting where he's like, his blooming is called destruction. And he basically is able to utilize his weapon and attack Kurosawa on a cellular level. He's like, by destroying those cells, because he's like, it's basically these cells inside of his body that allow him to regenerate. And it's like, if you destroy those cells, those parts of your body just become steel. They're just regular metal that can't be regenerated or morphed like you've been able to up until this point. So, and I loved his, once again, this interesting insight we get into these characters in these moments, like understanding Shinzo, where he talks about being a coward. He's like, obviously not liking the thought of hurting someone or someone he cares for being hurt. So for him, he's like, because I'm a coward, I obsess over weapons because I need to understand every detail of it. And I guess it's like the best way to protect the people you care about is understanding weapons to an extent, so you know how to deal with them, understand their force, their strength, their weak points, in case, like, right, you need to fight against a weapon, you need to know how to dismantle it. But also, the fear, knowing how much power a weapon has, just kind of like the situation with Bond and Taiyo, where like Bond was using the bullets and he's like, oh, I'm able to reduce the power of these bullets to make it so they don't hurt you. So I think there's kind of that element too of like him understanding weapons enough to know, okay, how much force do I need to put into this so it won't kill someone, because I don't want to kill anyone, but I don't want anyone killed either. So getting someone I care about getting hurt or killed either. So I even love during the fight, it's just an exchanging of blows, just kind of rapid like attacks. So it almost kind of feels like, especially with his destruction blooming, it feels kind of like a combination of like the the Hyuga style, like kind of the 8 palms technique, the 64 palms and 128 palms and stuff like that. It kind of reminds me of that to some extent, mixed with Naruto's Rasengan, because if I'm not mistaken, I feel like they only reference it once. I've never read the manga, so maybe they talk about more in the manga, but I could have sworn they only talked about it once in the anime, but I could be misremembering. But doesn't the Rasengan attack on a cellular level? I feel like I don't remember that ever being talked about, except for like one line of dialogue talking about that. Wasn't it Kakashi that said that? I think that was Shippuden related, because I think it was like Naruto's Wind Shuriken. Rasengan, I think, is what they more specifically were talking about, hit on a cellular level. But anyway, it just rapid exchanging of blows, and Kurosawa ends up slicing at Shinzo, which I think I even love that line if he's like, okay, good, because you did that, it was a little form of bloodletting, because it's like you ended up letting some of that blood out, and it kind of took some of the pressure off of my head, like the blood that was building up in my head. And because of that, he's like, and he ends up dealing the final blow to Kurosawa, but not killing him, because he's like, good. Which is so interesting considering he's sliced to pieces, but he's still, I guess, as long as there is a piece of him where the cells haven't been destroyed, he can always regenerate. It's just going to take more time. Like from that kind of, I guess, a little Deadpool-esque, where he's just like, he'll regrow from that fragment that's left. And so as long as the cells are active there, but it's just like you destroy the rest of the cells. So like 90% of his body, well, 95% of his body's useless. So this last 5% has got to handle all the regenerative properties. Because I'm about to say, well, I guess as long as he's conscious and aware that he can always come back from it. But Shinzo's like, yeah, if you hadn't taken the bait and struck me when you did, I would have gone berserk and I might have killed you. So, but before Shinzo could try and rally and meet up with the others, all like, more soldiers pop up and a few people's heads start popping, because it turns out Kawashita has had bombs implanted in certain people's head, a la very Suicide Squad-esque, and is basically killing anyone. Because it's like, sadly, not all their test subjects have them, so it seems like some of them might have, but we got rid of some people. This way we can make sure that none of our data or anything falls into the Yozakura's hands. It's like, for Kawashita, it's like, whatever, we lose this base, we lose some of these test subjects. It sucks, but it's not the end of the world. As long as the seed sowing project continues, that's all that matters. Which we now, because of Shion, she was able to finally recover some data and found out what the seed sowing project is. There's like 2 tons of, or like 2,000 tons or something like that. Even I can't remember the exact number. It's like shit ton of Yozakura is in this at the bottom area of this facility, and basically when it all goes boom, because that's like, oh, we'll destroy the base, whatever, the Yozakura will be spread out into the ocean, and in a couple years, with the currents going what it is, it'll spread out. It'll hit the coastal cities. Those who are not compatible will immediately self-destruct and die. Those who are semi-compatible will go berserk. And then even those who are compatible, like, you know, it will forever be changed. So this seems to be like kind of like a super villain level plan. But the question is, like, why? Why would Kawashita go this far? And we see him pull out a photo this episode, which you can assume is based on his family. But once again, they'll probably try to humanize him by making you understand where he's coming from. But still, it's just like he's a maniacal, evil person. But hey, you know, everyone has their reasons for becoming who they are. You might not agree with his reasons, obviously, and you probably won't be like, oh, that's not justifiable enough. But I mean, as we see, a lot of tragic backstories in this story, so. We didn't see Nano except for that little bit when he was still with Kengo, so I can only assume that he's going off the trike still, because Kengo was dealing with Aonuma like the entire episode, so I guess Kengo's like on his own is going off to deal with releasing and saving the test subjects, which based on the next episode, because we still have like 2 people left, we have Ai and Mizuki. I thought Ai and Nano would fight, and then Mizuki might fight Kishiro, but it seems more like by the end, it seems like it's going to be Kishiro and Taiyo versus Kawashita, but it could ultimately end up being Kawashita versus Kishiro, and Taiyo gets sent ahead to handle the mission that they were also given, that being recovering their mom's body. That might be Taiyo's mission, and that might lead to him crossing. I figured like it's got to be him and Momo. I feel like it's got to come down to that, so I think that's what the stage is going to be set up for. But I was kind of surprised when I saw like the Ai and Mizuki of it on. I'm like, oh, so I guess Kingo's going to not Kengo. I guess Nano's going to end up fighting both of them by himself. Maybe we'll see how that shakes out next episode. But once again, I'm getting way ahead of myself. Just because I was talking about Nano, I wanted to go ahead and kind of discuss that, so I don't forget to talk about it at the end of the episode. But either way, this main episode revolves around Kengo versus Kengo and Shion versus Aonuma and Cha-Cha. So basically, Cha-Cha is able to kind of get the upper hand on Shion because he's like, I know how you operate. Basically, you take the power from the place that you're hacking and use that as kind of your power supply. But if I'm powering down this entire facility, then you can't do anything about it. I'm hampering your capabilities. And it's like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because Kawashita's fine with whatever happens to this base as long as we defeat you guys and the seed sowing project goes along, then none of this matters. And just as she was reaching the lower percentages, because this was kind of having like there was like a backlash against like her brain because she was kind of tapped in directly, and so he was interfering with her like brain waves. But luckily, Kengo showed up, and it's like, you know, Shion's concerned because like, you're not even the combative type. But he's like, no. He's like, didn't I hear you say that you were in trouble and you needed me to save you? She's like, I never said that. But for him, he said something really beautiful where he talks about the fact is that because Shion is the way she is, it's like, yeah, you are the type that will get like very demoralized and just become a shut-in to the point you don't even see your family's faces anymore. The fact is, and she has a little bit of a Rean Schwarzer thing going on, which immediately goes on, where it's like, hey, you love people, but sometimes it's hard for you to understand and process that people love and care for you too. You'll go above and beyond for people, but you don't always expect them to do the same. And it's like, yeah, we love you. You're my sibling. Of course I'm going to go above and beyond for you. I've got your back. Through like, we all love you too. So like, kind of, you don't have to face anything alone because we got you. So And even though he isn't the combative type, he's running away from Aonuma, and all his different like balloon units are getting destroyed. But at the same time, Cha-Cha is able to lead him in the right direction. Could we find out Cha-Cha's circumstances? Cha-Cha was in a hospital, and it seems like we don't get the full context, but it seems he was abandoned. No one really thought much of him until Kawashita came, and it was like, oh, like they didn't realize who they were leaving behind. Cha-Cha talks about the rest of like the group. It's like, okay, like Akagi or Aonuma or Kurosawa and their powers. He's like, me, I'm just naturally gifted. And it's just like he's extremely smart. And that's why he's able to do it. That's his superpower in comparison to the rest of the group. Having like these extraordinary powers or afflictions and stuff. But me, mine is just purely my mind is what I'm able to do. And Kawashita was the only person who... And that's the sad thing of, despite... That's why they're willing to go as far as because they believe in Kawashita, whether it's just him as a person because he was there for them when no one else was. He saw them, he helped them, you know, and even someone like Shirai obviously had her complicated feelings and had to carry that guilt for years of, you know, what Kawashita did and her blaming herself for being a part of all of it, even though she, you know, but it's like my need to get better led to me benefiting from the sacrifice of others. So, you know, either way. But even Shion talks about Cha-Cha. She's like, right, I understand where you're coming from. Because she's like, I'm exactly like you. But the... when you start looking down on other people, that's when you become exactly like the people you hated who abandoned you, who looked at you like you were useless and left you behind. It's like once you start looking at people like that, that's where we start to... The major differences between the two of us start to shine in that regard. And ultimately what it comes down to is that Kengo, they had orchestrated this whole plan where like Kengo and Shion, this 1-2 punch of, he's disguised some of his puppets or his balloons as Aonuma, and now they ended up hacking into Cha-Cha's system, and now it's like, cool, we've been sending messages to you, now you don't know what's real, and now Aonuma's being flooded with information, now which one's really Cha-Cha and which one's BS concocted by Shion and Kengo, and the same thing for Cha-Cha, he can't get anything. It's like, right, when did that happen? When did I start talking to Kengo and not actually the real Aonuma? So it's just beautiful deception in that regard. But then in that moment, both Shion and Kengo activate their bloomings, and Kengo's is assimilation. He's like, I love that whole mirror neurons conversation, and it's like, oh, is that? I don't know if it is that. I guess that's a real thing of like, is that really how empathy works? Like on a neurological standpoint, it's just like, oh, like, or is that something like, is it a specific neuron, or is it just like a state that the neurons? I would assume it's a very specific neuron. Maybe that's like the non-technical scientific jargon. Maybe that's kind of like the colloquial. I'm not even going to say the word because I butcher the word every time. It's maybe like a more layman's term version of it. But I like the thought of it, whether it's real or not. The whole notion of a mirror neuron. It's like, yeah, it's a neuron that activates at the same time, and so when you look at a person, you empathize with them. And he's like, empathy is kind of my thing, and like I can supercharge empathy with my blooming, and that's assimilation. So he ends up taking Aonuma's eyes and ends up telling his backstory of him after his parents died. He ended up living on the street in an alleyway with his grandmother. Not really his grandmother, but she was a homeless woman that he lived with, and they fought and everything. He even said like, oh, why didn't this lady just go ahead and die? The moment she does, I'll have more room. But then like winter came and, you know, it started snowing, and it's like, oh, she's not here. So okay, what a pathetic life I led. But when he wakes up, he finds himself covered. She had sacrificed herself to make sure that he survived. It's like, despite them butting heads, it's kind of like, I'm older, you're a young kid, who knows how long we've been on the streets together, that it's like, yeah, I'm looking out for you. She's the same grandma that he references all the time, the same one, that the coat he's wearing, which is what got to Aonuma when he said all that, and he started trying to freeze Kengo, and he was just like, right, you won't be able to kind of shut my mouth. And it once again can give you some really interesting insight into Kengo, where Kengo was like, I get it. He's like, kindness can be scary, can't it? Because you never know whether kindness is genuine or not. There's like this side of you that's just kind of like, oh, like, is there going to be like, there's always going to be a catch, isn't there? You know, or I'm going to have to pay. Like, kindness isn't just kindness for kindness sake. Like, someone's always going to get something out of it. And even he admits that I have a hard time like accepting kindness too, because he's like, as someone who can take someone's identity and take their voice, it's hard to really accept genuine kindness. But for him, it's like Hite Satayo. It's like, I know that there are people out there who are willing, genuinely kind, who will sacrifice themselves for others, and it's just like wonderful idiots like them, you know. And it's like, what about your grandmother? Like, he's like, I'm gonna make you remember. And it's like that line from her that she probably said, and he absorbed subconsciously, but he probably wasn't fully awake enough to hear it. But she's like, she took care of him and she was smiling. And it's just like, it's like, right, you're not cold anymore. You're not cold, you know. And it's like, yeah, like he's warmed up. And because of that, because of Kengo saying that, it got to him. And I guess he just couldn't summon his powers anymore, because it's all like psychological, you know. And so, like, in that moment, he just kind of lost the will to fight. That iciness that's kind of stayed in him. Because it's like, yeah, he blamed himself. He had guilt over it. And it's like, she wouldn't want you to have any guilt. You'd have no guilt. You should have no guilt over it. That was a choice that she made for your sake. So warm yourself up, you know. And just, I think finally that guilt has frozen him in place for so long. And now the ice is finally thawed in a lot of ways. So. And then ultimately, Shion, hers is analyzation that she ended up, basically her brain becomes like a supercomputer, and she's like, yeah, just very simply is able to kind of go to the other side of Cha-Cha. It's like, oh, he's like, wait, it feels like I'm being seen. And she's like, yeah, I see you and everything, and now I have complete control of everything. Starts blowing up the monitors. So now they've kind of got back control. It's all about now stopping the island from exploding, allowing this seed sowing project to go ahead. So it becomes a race between, okay, can Shion deal with that remotely, or will Kishiro and Taiyo deal with that firsthand? But we see the end of the episode where they cross paths with Kawashita. So it will definitely be interesting to see how this all plays out. Only 3 episodes left in this season, so like I brought up earlier, Nano seems to be fighting Ai and Mizuki. We'll see whether that changes or not, but I'm excited to see what that looks like, because we haven't, finally get a chance to see what, because we still haven't fully seen what Kishiro's blooming is, or even what that looks like, as well as Nano's. So it's going to be interesting to see those two. We probably won't get to Kishiro's until either the end of next episode, or maybe early to middle of episode 26. So we'll have to wait to see, but I'm excited to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.